Today I'm starting this video with a voice of reason. Representative Kweisi Mfume. He's been in Congress since 1987, so when he says, "We know what the problem is," it's hard to argue. During this hearing, he didn't mince words, saying Congress knows what needs to be done, yet for years, we've watched as they fail to act on it. It's the same old story, promises, meetings, but no real solutions.
I want to, if I might, just kind of look through a long lens and give my impression as to why so many people across our nation believe that we simply know what the problem is and that we don't do enough about it. And for many years, the federal government has been reliant on a pay and chase and catch model, where payments are made up front and then payment errors are discovered and recovered, chased down after the fact, and some of the money is recovered. And while that type of model, I think, can succeed in recuperating some lost funds, I continue to believe that our biggest challenge is to prevent the fraud to begin with, to stop it before it starts. Now, in 1987, as a member of this body, with Ronald Reagan as president and Jim Wright as our Speaker of the House, myself and many others in that 100th Congress, which was a very partisan Congress. I mean, there were philosophical differences, but there was never seemingly a difference on the issue of fraud, because it affected all of our constituents, affected all of the government agencies, and we realized it was throwing money away. So during that time, one of the few things that seemed to come together was a general feeling across the aisle that this was a priority. So you, I hope, can imagine how I must feel now, 37 years later, after having spent 10 years here and been away for 23 and back for 4, that we're still dealing with the same thing. And so it's difficult to tell people, with all the suffering and hurt that needs to be addressed in our society and the efficiencies that need to be put in place, it's really difficult to say to the American onlooker, the taxpayer, the citizen, don't worry, we're working on this, we've got it. So I do hope, Mr. Chairman, that we really do have it this time. We're all kind of seeing this thing play out as if it's deja vu, and there's so much that can be done if we, as a Congress, do our job. Now, I think I'm speaking to the choir here on this committee, but the rest of our colleagues in the House and in the Senate must know that this, among so many other things, has to be right at the top of the priority list. So I've got a quick question for each of you. All of you have given great testimony as to what you think should be done. And Ms. Miller, I appreciate the fact that you've gone out and tried to put together an organization outside of Congress to deal with this. But if all of you could just give me one thing from your own perspective as to what the #1 priority of the Congress should be, I'll either come up with 3 priorities or we'll have unanimity in some form or another as to how we should go forward. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Horowitz, if you don't mind.
I think the biggest opportunity now since 1987 is data. And I think agencies, as Ms. Miller indicated, IGs need to have data access, and data tools to put enough hurdles in place to prevent fraud and improve program integrity.
Thank you. Ms. Brown.
Mine is consistent. It's really prevention, which the data is a key part of the prevention, but we have to make sure that agencies understand that prevention is key. And having upfront controls isn't at odds with their core mission. It's actually integral to the mission. And I think that is, if Congress could push on one place, I think that's critically important, because that will make it a priority for the agencies.
Thank you. Ms. Miller.
I just want to absolutely agree with what Mr. Horowitz said. I think I would have said that, but since I get to say a second thing, I also believe we have to do something about the incentives that we don't have in place. I mean, why did we lose this much fraud during the pandemic? And there's almost, I mean, we're just wringing our hands. Nothing's really happened. Agency leaders have to see this as a priority. I mean, you made an excellent point. Why in 30 years is this not a priority? You know why it isn't? Is because when somebody doesn't get a benefit, they call you up and they say, I need to get my benefit quicker. And boy, that happens. Customer experience, user experience, we are investing in that. And I'm not saying that's a problem. We should be doing that. But nobody's calling up. This is a silent problem. The fraud actors are quietly over here stealing the money, and no one's calling their congressman. And so the agency leaders are content to look the other way and say, we don't have a fraud problem here. And so there has to be something has to change where agency leaders are held accountable and they have incentives, whether those are carrots or sticks or both, so that we're not going to be sitting here in 37 more years saying, gee, agency leaders just don't prioritize this problem.
It's frustrating to hear, but Mfume's right. Congress has had the tools to tackle issues like improper payments and fraud for years, yet here we are, still having these conversations. We're letting billions slip through the cracks, and who's holding the system accountable? Not enough people. And that's exactly what this hearing was about, trying to get to the bottom of why more isn't being done. Now let's jump to Representative Summer Lee, who came in with some real direct questions. She put the spotlight on Miss Brown, one of the witnesses, and asked something we've all been wondering. What percentage of these improper payments are considered overpayments? Simple question, right? But the answer, well, it says a lot.
My colleagues have touched on this throughout our hearing today, but to get to the heart of what we're talking about, improper payment simply means that the government did not or cannot tell whether it's payments to the right person, got payments to the right person, or in the right amount. Ms. Williams-Brown, overpayments, where the government sent more money to someone than they were supposed to receive, are considered improper payments. Is that correct?
Correct.
About what % of errors in payments were overpayments?
90%.
Goodness, that was more than I thought. Overpayments aren't necessarily fraudulent. It could be that someone isn't even aware they received an improper overpayment, right?
Yes.
Thank you. So the Social Security and Disability Insurance programs have a history of these types of overpayments, ones where the recipient isn't even aware they were overpaid. Ms. Brown, if the Social Security Administration somehow overpays a person's Social Security benefits, the Social Security Administration is required to take that money back. What are some of the ways an agency like SSA might try to get that money back?
So they have a number of possibilities. In some cases, the person can to repay the amount in full. There may be payments made over time. So there are a range of actions that an agency like SSA could take to try to recoup it. Some agencies associate it with refunds, federal refunds. In some cases, waivers are a possibility. So there are a range of potential actions.
So as you said, we've seen in some cases, SSA would dock a Social Security recipient's monthly benefits entirely, though, forcing some seniors and those with disabilities to lose their homes or go without food. So the government makes a mistake, and the person on Social Security benefits, who was likely unaware of the overpayment, pays the price, literally. Fortunately, as a small fix by this administration, recipients of these overpayments now have nearly double the time to repay the government than they had previously, but more time can still be a problem. So recouping overpayments has real kitchen table, as we call them, implications for seniors and people with disabilities who rely on Social Security benefits and live on tight budgets. Any change in the amount can mean less food or a missed mortgage payment or foregoing medications. These heartbreaking scenarios could be prevented if the government leveraged technologies to more effectively track program payments from the outset. Mr. Horowitz, the PRAC has made great strides in advancing how the government uses data to prevent improper payments and pandemic spending. What have been some of your greatest successes?
So, Congresswoman, I think you're absolutely right. You know, one of the things that what we've been able to do with the analytics efforts is, well, first of all, support tracking down the fraudsters. Because, as I said earlier, these are people who stole money from the public, who harmed intended recipients. So that, I think, has been very important. But I think another thing that we've done that has really changed the way we do oversight is we've worked closely with our state and local oversight partners, with state auditors, county officials, with GAO, which we had a close relationship with before this, but working with state and locals, we got word to them early on about fraud alerts that we were seeing, so they could do, as you said, stop things early, prevent it early, and thereby ensure money was going to go to the beneficiaries, the unemployed, the small businesses, not the fraudsters.
Certainly. And Mr. Horowitz, a lot of that success also has been through leveraging cyber talent, data analytics to improve these processes, correct?
Correct.
Would codifying the analytic capacity of the PRAC help combat improper payments or, and overpayments?
Absolutely, they would. It is such an important and potential prevention tool that we just shouldn't lose.
Thank you. So improper payments, they just don't exist in the government contracting world. It affects real people who rely on these benefits to live. No one should worry about affording their prescription drugs or putting food on the table because the government is clawing back on overpayments that they didn't even realize they received. I'm hopeful that this upcoming scorecard will incentivize agencies to use technologies that prevent these improper payments. Of course, our constituents deserve nothing less, and also it is something that is anxiety-inducing and truly, punishing folks who've done no wrong, but still, we have to make sure that we're correcting these.
And you're exactly right, Congresswoman. Can I add to that?
Please.
As I mentioned earlier, there are people who were the intended beneficiaries who fraudsters beat to the unemployment line, and they had to prove they were the real person. And for someone who doesn't have the money and who needs the unemployed, very hard for them to find someone to help them get through the agency bureaucracy at that point, right? In addition, I bet you all of your constituents were the victims of an identity theft and a fraud that occurred. They were not beneficiaries. They were simply people whose identities were stolen, who learned after the fact when they got a 1099 from the IRS or a notice from their local government that somehow they got benefits that they never got. And those are victims here also, I'm sure, in every district in the country.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I thank you all for your time, and thank you to our chair and ranking member for this important hearing.
And then Representative Jasmine Crockett hit the nail on the head. With all the technology we have today, why aren't we using it to solve these problems? During the hearing, Crockett didn't hold back. She made it clear that instead of sitting back and letting millions disappear every year due to improper payments and fraud, we should be investing in the technology that can stop this from happening in the first place.
First of all, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me, and thank you so much for pulling together this hearing. I want to go over a few things. Some of the things were actually just brought up by my colleague. I was surprised to hear that 90% was the percentage of overpayments, which leaves 10%, if I'm good at my math, potentially that would be the realm for fraud. Go ahead.
I would just say that improper payments includes underpayments, so the 10% could also include underpayments.
Oh, but, okay.
Yeah.
Got what you're saying. So we're saying that there's potentially, okay. So my question is this. If we had to tie down, and if you don't know the answer, that's fine, because literally I'm just going here because I just was surprised by the number. If I had to tie down how much money we're losing specifically as it relates to fraud, do we have a number for that?
So we did an estimate of losses related to fraud based on 2018 to 2022 data.
Okay.
And we estimate that the range is between $233 and $521 billion annually.
Okay. And my next question is, because I don't have this information, so if you don't, that's okay as well. As it relates to recommendations around technology, there have been a lot of conversations around basically upgrading, doing something different, basically moving us forward instead of kind of sticking to the old way. Do we have estimates or proposals or requests that have been made by any agency as it relates to what it would cost us to go ahead and put in the technology that would be most helpful?
I am not aware of an estimate.
Yeah, I'm not aware of an estimate, and I think one of the challenges, Congresswoman, is what you and others have talked about here, which is agencies aren't incentivized necessarily to come forward with that number and to focus on fixing this problem, which is why I think this hearing's been so valuable.
Okay, well, I'm going to say this right now. I'm charging all of y'all to go and get me some numbers, because at the end of the day, the American people are relying upon us, especially those of us that sit on oversight, to actually be watchdogs over their tax dollars. And so I really hate to leave a situation where we've had lots of good, feel-good conversations and we have no solutions. And so most technology costs money. For instance, we've had oversight hearings as it relates to issues with Department of Defense who cannot pass their audits, and at least we're getting estimates on what the cost would be. I at least would like to say that we have had that information before us, because none of us, and I'm maybe being presumptuous, sitting up here have the expertise to know what it is that you need to make sure that these agencies are going to be able to better do their jobs. And the reason that I asked for the numbers is because I could guess, this is just a guesstimate, that whatever the technology cost, it is less than $233 to $521 billion a year. That's just my guess, but I could be wrong. And I am here to provide some sort of solutions. In addition to that, I appreciate this hearing because, number one, we're acknowledging that there's a problem. That's a good start for us specifically here in Congress to agree on that. But one of the issues that I have is kind of this blind eye that we sometimes turn, because as we are in election season, and there's definitely a candidate that said that he's just going to get rid of fraud in his first 6 months. I don't know what kind of wizardry he has going on to be able to snap his fingers and get rid of anything in 6 months. But I would like real solutions because the talking is not getting us anywhere. It's my understanding that if we go back a few years, back to 2013, I believe the number as it relates to this particular conversation was down at 35 billion. Yeah, back in 2003. The number was 35 billion, and now we are truly just going through the roof. And again, as we are hearing the conversations around how the American people are struggling, we need to do something better about the monies that we are getting in so that we can then move on to help people that need help, such as those that are relying on SNAP benefits and things like that. So I appreciate any assistance that y'all can provide, and maybe the next proposed budgets, y'all can put in something for technology upgrades to help and assist all agencies that need the help and assistance to make sure that we can start to rein this in. Thank you so much, and I yield.
I mean, she's right. We've got the tools to fix this, but for some reason, Congress just isn't pushing hard enough to make it happen. It's like we're choosing to lose money instead of stepping into the future with tech solutions that could save us millions. Crockett wasn't just talking about possibilities. She was talking about action, and that's exactly what we need more of. So at the end of the day, it's clear. We have the knowledge, we have the technology, but what we're missing is the will to get things done. Representatives like Kweisi Mfume, Summer Lee, and Jasmine Crockett aren't just talking. They're calling for real action. And we need more of that if we're ever going to stop these billions from slipping through the cracks. Thanks for watching. If you agree that it's time for Congress to step up, drop a comment below. And remember, stay woke. See you in the next one.